Hey guys, welcome to another Friday video. Today we're putting together a Windows XP retro gaming PC, but this one is a little bit different. In most of our videos we are showcasing specific components like a certain processor, and usually the conclusion is that a range of games work really well, but there are games where it's a compromise and we're not getting the best experience. This one is different. This is a Windows XP retro gaming machine that I would build for myself. The performance is outstanding. Every XP era game will run at 60 plus FPS, very likely a lot higher. And this is the sort of system that I could happily recommend if anyone asks, what do you recommend for building a Windows XP retro gaming PC? So not only is the performance going to be really nice, it is also energy efficient and quiet. The machine is basically inaudible and we're getting all the nice benefits of a modern computer. So we're avoiding issues like capacity plague, and the prices are also cheap. There will be some affiliate links down below in the description where you can get some of these components on AliExpress. We will spend quite a bit of time talking about the components, and I will also touch on alternatives. We've got benchmarks and quite a lot of gameplay footage captured on a second machine. So what you see on the screen is exactly the performance that you would get on a monitor. So let's begin by talking about the core system, the heart of the computer, so to speak. Sandy Bridge and Ivy Bridge, this is the generation that I recommend for a powerful Windows XP retro gaming PC, and prices have come down nicely. Now, of course, in a lot of my past videos, we looked at more period correct, authentic retro gaming PCs, but we usually found that in more modern games like Fear or Far Cry, the performance was just not good enough. This is different in this machine. It will run those games silky smooth at 100 plus FPS. So the socket we're working today is LGA 1156. The processor I'm using is the i5-2400, mostly because this is what I have available. You're looking at around $30 for such a processor on AliExpress. It is a quad-core processor with a base clock of 3.1 GHz, and it's got a single core turbo of 3.4 GHz. There are alternatives. You can use an i7, i5 and i3, even a Pentium. Now I went into the BIOS. If you have an i7, do disable hyperthreading. That can cause some issues with Windows XP era games. And this step might seem a bit controversial, but it's something I've done for many years. I disable all the cores but one. So basically I'm turning this into a fast single core processor. In a lot of Windows XP games, you will have to go into Task Manager and change the CPU affinity to only use one thread. Yeah, I'm too lazy. I like to lock it in the BIOS, and this just makes sure that there are no compatibility issues with older games. For cooling, we have the Arctic Alpine 12 low profile and worked really well for this project. We need a mainboard, of course. So this is a H61 chipset mainboard from Gigabyte. You're looking at around 30 to 40 US dollars by getting a used one from AliExpress. This is a no frills motherboard, micro ADX. We have 4 SATA ports, PCI Express 16 and 2 1X ports. It's all there, only 2 RAM modules. Let's have a look at all the ports. We have 2 PS2. VGA, there are 4 USB, gigabit Ethernet, and also audio. For this project, and the machine being very low power, we're not interested in overclocking or anything like that. It worked perfectly fine for this project. We also need some RAM. We're going to use Windows XP 32-bit, which has a 4 GB limit. You can use 8 GB of RAM, it just won't use the entire capacity. I went with a 4 GB dual channel memory kit. The processor supports 1333 megahertz RAM, and yep, I just loaded the BIOS defaults and off we go. A very important choice is which graphics card are you gonna go for, and there are lots of choices. I went with a GTX 750 Ti. This is a model from Gigabyte. It's got a really nice selection of output ports and a nice large fan. This is really quiet. It was basically inaudible. The GTX 750 usually does not require a PCI Express power connector. This model does. It doesn't really pull a lot of power. We will look at the power consumption figures very shortly. So this 750 Ti has 1 gigabyte of VRAM, but you can get models with 2 gigabytes. I actually recommend going for one with a gig. That's perfectly fine for Windows XP, and you might actually run into some issues if you have too much VRAM. Performance is fantastic, but there are alternatives. So if you're looking for a card that does not need a 6-pin power connector, there is a model from Asus. So this is also a 750 Ti, no power connector. It's got slightly less ports available, and both of these cards you can get from AliExpress. You're looking at around $30 to $40. If you're a fan of AMD, ATI, or Radeon, what about this one? This is a 7770 Radeon with 1 gigabyte of VRAM. Yeah, the question of the ages. Should you go for a Radeon or a GeForce? And the choice is actually, well, at least the reason for me choosing the cards is quite different. And look, this is just a general observation of me working with graphics cards for many, many years. You might disagree, but what I found is that the GeForce cards, they have an advantage with OpenGL games. The compatibility is a little bit better. Performance of all these cards is fine, so I wouldn't use performance as a consideration, but OpenGL compatibility is a little bit stronger on the GeForce cards. However, the Radeon cards have a huge benefit when it comes to the drivers. For Windows XP, they support the GPU scaling option. So if you use a widescreen monitor and you want to have a 4:3 aspect ratio image, go for a Radeon card. You get the GPU scaling, which is not around on the latest GeForce driver anymore. Also, if your monitor uses HDMI and you want to be able to control the color range between full and limited RGB, you can only do this on the Radeon driver. On the GeForce, it will default to limited RGB, and on a PC monitor, you get a washed out image. So this is how I would pick if you have a native monitor, and we will look at the monitor option shortly, then go with GeForce. But if you need GPU scaling and if you're using HDMI, I would pick a Radeon. Another real highlight is hardware accelerated audio, which is a thing of the past. So this is a Sound Blaster X5 Titanium with the PCI Express interface, and this is the sort of sound card I would recommend. Even if you're not too much into audio, EAX makes a huge difference and will sound absolutely lovely. There are some driver options. If you're using speakers, do make sure that CMSS 3D is deactivated, but if you're using headphones, make sure the sound options are configured for headphones and that CMSS 3D is activated. You will get positional 3D audio over your headphones. Don't buy any gaming headphones, just get really nice hi-fi headphones. And yeah, I can tell you stories from playing Battlefield 2142. It was such an experience. You could hide behind cover and you could hear exactly where the enemies were, and then get out of cover and shoot at them. And another game, Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, that game sounds absolutely lovely with such a sound card. And for storage, even with a Windows XP retro gaming PC, I like fast loading times, so we're going with an SSD. This is crucial. Let's have a look. It's a BX100. 500 gigabytes, and worked beautifully for this project. Now, I get comments about wear and tear. I don't care. I believe it's not an issue anymore with modern SSDs. They do a bit of garbage collection in the background, and as long as you don't fill it all the way, the entire capacity, there shouldn't be any issues. Now, aligning the partitions is also something that I get a lot of comments on. I use a partition utility, like after installing Windows XP, I run the utility and that lets me align the partition. It does a reboot, and yeah. So if that's something that concerns you, just run such a tool to align your partition and get maybe even better performance, or looking after your SSD. And we're using a Deepcool 650 watt fully modular power supply. I've got some power consumption figures. Sitting idle on the desktop, that's the entire machine with the sound card, the video card, RAM and everything. We're looking at only 38 watts. So yeah, fantastic result, and the entire machine is inaudible. Basically running Far Cry, so that's the machine being fully loaded, only 70 watts. So not only will this machine deliver excellent performance and you won't hear it, it also consumes very little power. And now we're going to talk about the monitor. Now this is something I usually don't spend a lot of time talking about, although it's important because this is ultimately what we're looking at and how we are viewing our games. And there are lots of options, but my preference and what I recommend you should definitely give a go is going for a 19-inch monitor with a 1280 by 1024 resolution. So this has an aspect ratio of 5:4, so it's a little bit off from 4:3, which means in some games the heads-up display is a little bit vertically stretched, but it's really minor and usually you're not gonna notice. Having 1024 horizontal lines, it's very close to 1080, so you're getting a nice, sharp, high-resolution image. The resolution is not too demanding, so most average video cards that have XP drivers will handle it just fine. And such a monitor can be had for very little money, for free even if you ask around. But modern monitors with modern panels are still being produced for businesses. So you've got a choice of old and new. And yeah, it's just a really nice balanced monitor in terms of performance, resolution, price. And for retro games, I really prefer that retro, more square look compared to playing on widescreen. Let's quickly talk about alternatives. You can use a 16:9 monitor, of course, and then have either a letterboxed image if you're using a Radeon with the GPU scaling, or your monitor does the scaling for you. But you can also go to websites like Widescreen Gaming Forum or PC Gaming Wiki, and many games can be modified to support widescreen. It's just a preference. I prefer the older 4:3 aspect ratio look over widescreen. And finally, there is the 1600 by 1200 resolution. This is like the 4K for retro games, but such monitors are a little bit harder to find. You need a 1920 by 1200 monitor. They do exist, but they cost a lot more than just grabbing a 19-inch 1280 by 1024 monitor. And this is the resolution we will use in every game. So enough talking about the hardware, let's focus on the software, and then we're gonna have a look at some games. So many times in the past I've been using the easy to boot project, which lets me install Windows XP off a USB flash drive. I've done a full tutorial on that, so I will put a card on the top right hand corner of the screen. So that let me install Windows XP. Next up, I use the Snappy Driver Installer. This will identify all the components and then install all the drivers, but I deselected the video driver because I'm downloading the latest driver from the GeForce website. And also for the sound card, I'm using the Daniel K X-Fi Support Pack 4.0. After that, we have DirectX 9, and then I'm installing benchmarks and some games. And for Windows XP Retro Gaming, we have to run 3D Mark. So here we have 2001 SE. We're getting 68,240. So that's roughly 5 to 6 times as fast as on the Pentium 4 3 GHz machine that we looked at in a recent video. And here are the games. We're kicking off things with Far Cry. All the games run at 1280 by 1024, and I maxed out all the details. So in Far Cry, I believe it's very high, but for water, there's an ultra detail with some nice reflections. And indoors, we're getting really high FPS. And usually when you step outside the first level and you see the ocean and the jungle and all of that, the performance usually goes down quite a bit. But here we're getting above 100 FPS. So Far Cry looks beautifully on this machine. All details are cranked up to the max and we're getting an extremely playable experience. Doom 3 is another classic for retro Windows XP gaming. All the games also, if there was an option for EAX sound, I went into the options and turned that on, and I used the fiber optic output of the sound card to do all the capturing, so we should get some fairly decent audio. So Doom 3, the game has a 60 FPS cap, but I ran the benchmark, and again we're getting over 100 FPS. That's a 1280 by 1024, all details set to ultra. Fear is next. Once again, 1280 by 1024. I maxed everything out. We are using soft shadows as well, which is very demanding. But even with these settings, once again, this system delivers excellent performance. And I can highly recommend that you go to GOG, for example, and pick up the Fear collection. I believe it's 1 game and 2 expansion packs. It is such a good game, and it's a real highlight of the Windows XP era. And yeah, also supports EAX and has some really good sound. Quake 4 is next. This game is a little bit more modern compared to Doom 3, but performs similar. We're running a 1280 by 1024, of course. All the details are maxed out. Once again, there's a 60 FPS cap, but not once did it drop below. So this is another nice shooter that you can also pick up on GOG, DRM free. And yep, lovely game to play. I still haven't finished it. I finished Doom 3, haven't finished Quake 4, but it seems to be a fun shooter. Properly pronounced, we have Return to Castle Wolfenstein. This is a classic, uses OpenGL, 1280 by 1024 of course. All the details are maxed out, including the dynamic shadows, and there's a FPS cap in the engine. You can open the console and remove that, but 90 FPS is perfectly fine. And yeah, another game that will run absolutely perfect on this machine. Halo is next, and this is also a game I vividly remember from the Windows XP era. Lots of magazines and websites used it as a benchmark, and when it came out, video cards like a Radeon 9800, they ran the game fine, but it had some nice particle effects, and definitely most machines struggled with this game. On this machine, this is not the case. I cranked everything, all the options. We're running a 1280 by 1024, of course. We have EAX audio enabled, of course, and yep, silky smooth performance. So another game that is a real joy to play on this machine. Painkiller is next. Seems to be a fun FPS shooter. I have showcased this game in the past. It is also available on GOG without any DRM, so if you're interested, grab it from there. Didn't play too much, it's usually just the first level I try out to see how it works. And yep, 1280 by 1024, all details maxed out and seems to run just fine. Let's have a look at some racing games. We have the first Need for Speed Underground. This game has a 60 FPS cap. I went into the options, 1280 by 1024 of course, and there are some other graphics options like the motion blur and the light trails that you need to enable, so I cranked all that up and we're getting a locked 60 FPS. So this is a game that you might want to play with VSync enabled to get rid of any tearing and get that silky 60 FPS experience. I also have the second game, Need for Speed Underground 2. This one has an FPS cap of 120 FPS, so performs a little bit better. It's a little bit more demanding. Once again, 1280 by 1024, all details maxed out, but it's locked at 120 FPS, so another racing game that is running really well on this machine. And we have one more game. This is called one more racing game. This is called Insane. You can pick it up on GOG. This is a little bit older and also seems to have some sort of 60 FPS cap. And yeah, nice physics engine with the suspension system and everything. So this is a game where you have to race to get to goals before everyone else. Quite interesting. And yeah, also runs perfectly fine on this machine. A real classic is Battlefield 2. This is the demo version, and I remember picking this up at Pizza Hut. So in Australia we were called Pizza Noobs. Pizza Hut did this promotion of selling Need for Speed games and Battlefield 2 and I think The Sims together with pizzas. And yeah, there was this huge influx of new Battlefield 2 players, and of course we got totally owned by the veterans, but I stuck with it. I wasn't too much into Battlefield 2, it was more the Battlefield 2142 that I really got into, but I have such good memories of playing Battlefield 2. Once again, 1280 by 1024. All the options in the detail settings are maxed out. I've enabled the hardware accelerated audio, and yep, runs and looks perfectly fine. No retro gaming PC without Half-Life 2. This is the Steam version, which if you don't know is actually DRM free. You can just copy it out of your Steam folder onto a USB, onto another machine, and it will just work. So the irony of having Steam with DRM and then selling one of your most iconic games without DRM. Very interesting. 1280 by 1024, all details maxed out. Here we have also 16x and isotropic filtering. Just a comment on that. Usually I force that in the driver to always have 16x, but in this video I didn't. I had a look in the game, and if there's an option for 16x and isotropic filtering, I did enable it, but if there was no option, I didn't. And once again, Half-Life 2, another game that runs fantastic on this machine. I get asked about Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic quite often. It's a game I don't quite enjoy working with. I'm not into these RPG games, and in the beginning there's just a huge introduction going on with not much to see, so it's also not the most interesting game to benchmark. But yeah, it runs well, it looks good. 1280 by 1024, of course. All the details are maxed out, and if that's a game you want to play, I believe you can also pick it up on GOG without any DRM, and another game that works flawlessly on this computer. So guys, by now I think you got the message. Any Windows XP era game should run flawlessly on this machine. 100 plus FPS, even with all the details maxed out. And this is the sort of experience that I want you guys to have if you're building a dedicated Windows XP retro gaming machine. I totally understand the need or the desire to have something period correct. If you had a Pentium 4 back in the day and you have happy memories of that era, I totally understand. Build a Pentium 4 and you'll have a good time, but you will always run into some sort of a limitation or a bottleneck, and especially games like Far Cry, maybe even Doom 3 and Fear, they can be quite demanding as soon as you crank up the details and the resolution. So here you have to maybe play with medium details, and the PC we built today is no compromise. Of course, you can go even more hardcore. For example, if you want to have something with 240 Hz gaming, or you want to do something with super sampling anti-aliasing, then you need to look at some more extreme options, and that's maybe something for a future video. But for a good XP retro gaming experience with games just working out of the box with minimal fuss, then this is the sort of machine that I would put together for myself, and also can happily recommend to any one of you out there. Most of the parts, if you don't like AliExpress, you should be able to find them locally for a very good price. You can also pick up a small form factor OEM machine like a HP Elite 8200 or something like that, and get a 750 low profile video card, and you get the exact same performance. Finding a low profile sound blaster with EAX is a little bit harder. They do exist, but they're definitely harder to find. So here low profile makes life a little bit more difficult. So all up, this was a project I really enjoyed working on. I love the Windows XP era, and as much as I'm into retro and budget, I think every era has an interesting story to tell, and I find them all very interesting. So I like to jump around in time back and forth a little bit. And yeah, I really enjoyed this project. For once, we have a machine that runs everything flawless, and we're getting decent performance in every single game, and I was able to crank up all the details and still get amazing FPS. And yeah, at this point, it's time for you guys to leave a comment. Let me know what you think of this project. And yeah, let me know what you think about building a Windows XP retro gaming PC in the first place. I'm fully aware that most of these games, they do run fine under Windows 10, but there are issues with the EAX audio, and it's just a little bit less hassle building a dedicated, well, maybe not the building part, but once you have a Windows XP retro gaming PC, games will just work. Especially if your games are on optical discs and they've got weird copy protections going on. This might not work under Windows 10 64-bit anymore, but if you've got a 32-bit Windows XP installation, then all these discs should work just fine. So yeah guys, I hope you found this video interesting. Do leave a comment. I read every single one of them. I might not reply because yeah, time is limited, and producing a video every week can be quite challenging with real life issues and all of that stuff. But yeah, if you found it interesting, you haven't subscribed, please do so. Give it a like, share the video with your friends, and yeah, let me know what you want to see for future projects. I keep a big list, and eventually I should come around to your suggestion. And that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. I shall see you soon with another Friday video. Every now and then there will be a bonus video on Tuesday. Yeah, haven't had one of those in quite a while. I've just been too busy. But that's it. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you soon.